Hello and welcome, guys. Happy Monday. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Welcome, guys, to Rise and Shine. I've got a awesome guest joining me today, but before I bring him on, let me say hello to everybody. We have got Deadman Walking 55. Good morning. Good morning to Darth Hasta. Always good to see you, sweetheart. Avon Alwyn Avalon, sorry, sweetheart. Good to see you. Snorter Poopus Cuba, good to see you. He says there's that short purple skirt again. Absolutely. Good morning to Mark, the infinitely tired. Good to see you. Psycho Dwarf 9, good morning. Debud Martin, good morning. Nearsighted Cyclops, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Let me see who else has joined us. Pretty sure I saw Chris Persia earlier. Good morning to you, Chris. And Project Storytime, I think, was first, if I remember correctly, this morning. So I hope you guys are all having a fantastic morning. As I said, hello, SJ Almighty. Good morning. Good to see you. And Lord Fuff, good morning to you too. As I say, I've got a fantastic guest joining me today. It's his first time on Rise and Shine. So, guys, give him a massive, massive welcome. It is Lightning Shrimp, otherwise known as Pet S. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Now, I know we were talking in the green room, and we've been talking kind of backstage as well. Rick and Morty, obviously, big fans. The season 5 has just kicked off, so we thought, what better way to kind of kick off the week than giving our views on this cult TV show?
It was great. It was a good, strong first episode. Not the best, uh, but not the best episode, and it's not even the best first episode of a season. But I thought it was pretty strong. I thought it was a great intro. A new person who probably won't be revisited for another season or two because that's what they love to do. Introduce this great, fascinating character, and then let's shelve them for the next two seasons. But no, I thought it was strong. I thought it was good storytelling, good development, lots and lots of callbacks, and just a really great storytelling along the line. Interesting B plot. I think it did good. I think it did good. You know, you agreed, right? You thought it was pretty solid.
I agree. I agree. I think this is one of the better openings of the season that they've had. I mean, we were saying in the green room because we were kind of comparing the different seasons, and a couple of them were a little bit weaker than others, but this one they seems to be back on form.
Without a doubt, I don't know how many people in the chat are real. And Purple, I didn't ask you that backstage. Maybe we could ask the chat that, like, on a 1 through 5, maybe if you're comfortable with that, can people put in the chat like how familiar they are with the show and how familiar, like 5 being like you're a super fan and 1 being like Pat and Purple, I don't know what y'all are talking about, and that can maybe give us a little bit of an idea of how much we're playing with, because I told you, and I really stand behind it, which I think one of the best episodes ever and the strongest episode was one opening episode was season 3, where Rick basically escapes from the intergalactic prison, and that just was such a phenomenally dynamic show, and just everything it had in it was pretty amazing. It's going to be really hard to beat that one day. um but this episode, I gotta tell you, season 5, second strongest opening of a season, including the pilot, which I thought was great and really set a lot of things in motion.
I'd agree with that. We seem to have some kind of mixed numbers. So we've got some people that are really big fans. We've got some people that want to kind of learn. So Alwyn says 1, but I catch on fast. So should we give our audience a little bit of kind of backstory um, to the show before we kind of jump into this particular episode, just to
A
kind of catch
hundred, a
people up?
hundred percent, 100%. As a matter of fact, if you think of it, how lucky is Arwen? Because if we convince her to go watch this show, she has over, over 4 full seasons and a new episode to watch, so she can really catch up and hopefully fall in love with it. Yeah, basically, in its simplest form, and I made a note to myself, Patrick, don't be a historian, because I love history. And, my first thought would be to
Go
go
for it.
back into, would be to go back into the, how Justin Roiland was in school, with actually with some very interesting people. If you're a Gravity Falls fan, he and the creator of Gravity Falls, were actually pretty good buds, and there's a lot of play and interaction that maybe one day we'll talk about between their two shows, and those guys in general. As a matter of fact, and his name escapes me right now, but the guy who created Gravity Falls actually voiced the character, or maybe even two at this point, on Rick and Morty. But Justin Roiland, who is the creator, along with Dan Harmon, who you might recognize from his run in Community, um, decided that they got together, and Roiland had kind of presented to him, listen, I have this whole thing where where I kind of pay homage to Doc and Marty from, of course, the famous trilogy of the Back to the Future shows.
Teacher.
And
Yes.
and as a matter of fact, there's a couple of shorts out there that you could find, or maybe one longer thing that they've broken up into parts, where it's actually Doc and Marty, and they're interacting, and it's a guy that looks a lot like Morty, but he's wearing like the orange vest and everything and all that. Well, they just decided with copyright issues that would just be too problematic,
Yeah,
so
I
they
think it's a
so
little
they
bit too on the nose.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they moved on, and they said, we're going to switch around a little bit, and we're going to take some ideas and concepts from this and that, and just decided to basically set out to do a science fiction sitcom that just happened to be animated, because you could do more with animation. And of course, Adult Swim um, jumped on it like right away. They saw the treatise, and they were like, and Dan Harmon's name being on it, they pretty much jumped on it right away and developed it. And it's mostly the story of Rick Sanchez, who is the grandfather of Morty, and it is Morty, and Morty Smith, who he has kind of come into their lives again with his daughter, who is Morty's mom, and her husband Jerry, and their other child Summer, which is Morty's older sister. He's kind of come into their lives again after being absent for what seems like many years, certainly since at least Morty's birth. There's some play in there where you see some callbacks on other episodes that maybe Rick was with Morty at some point, and as a baby, but certainly not that new. And the pilot episode there again, people always say, if you're going to show somebody an episode of Rick and Morty to win them over, I don't think the pilot episode's the best episode. I think it's a great episode, but it's certainly an episode that establishes everything. It really does what a pilot should do, right? It tells you who these people are. You get a concept of who the other people in the show are going to be. And boy, did they knock that out the park with that. They, they really did.
Was a good pilot episode. And let
Yeah,
me just grab this super
sure. Go
chat.
ahead.
Sorry, sweetheart.
No problem.
Mexican Eye Man, thank you, honey. He sends us a 4.99 super chat. It says, "Hail, Perez. Is that you, my brother?"
Yes, it is. Thank you. Oh, and don't forget, Purple. I'm still new here. You have to be gentle with me. This is my virginal. So if you have to grab a super chat, just say it. I just noticed, like, in the little chat and StreamYards, it says, "Hey Patrick," and I'm like, so just stop me, because I can rattle on sometimes. But
Oh no, I
so but
never take
yeah,
over
and
like this.
it like I was saying, it's this at the core, it's a buddy show. Obviously Rick, as you would figure, is being the adult and the older person, because Morty is supposed to be 14 at the beginning of the show, and it doesn't look like you age much on the show. And Rick is, I would assume, somewhere in his 50s, 60s. He might be 150 for all we know, because as you find out, Rick is not only the smartest man in the universe, he's probably the smartest man in many dimensions in every universe, and definitely one of the most powerful men in the universe. Um, but he's also very misanthropic. He's also self-centered. He's a jerk a lot of the times. But it seems like when the chips are down, that he really does love his family. He certainly has guilt. If you see the episode before this one, which was the end of season 4, he's a man of regret, right? He lives a life that, those exciting and fun, and where he must feel vastly superior to most people he encounters. He certainly is lonely, and in a lot of ways, I would say that Morty is probably his best friend. His best friend is this 14-year-old kid who is just trying to make his way in the world and is very lost in a lot of ways, and a kind of a dork, your average Joe. And but there's this connection between the two of them, and of course the other players on the show, I think, do a great job of not just boosting them up, but they have their own personalities that have developed over the seasons. Like I said, Jerry Smith is Morty's dad and Rick's son-in-law, and he's kind of the dim-witted, but kind of more of, we don't like to admit this, but there's probably a lot more of Jerry in us than there is Rick, right? Rick's this brilliant,
Yes.
but
Well,
Jerry's kind of a
Rick's,
guy.
as you say, he's not a nice person. Jerry is just he's just a guy that's trying to kind of get on with his life and
Yeah, yeah,
always on the back foot because of what's happening.
and he loves his kids, and he loves his wife, and he feels like he doesn't deserve his wife, and and she's definitely more successful than him. Beth Smith, who's Rick's daughter and Jerry's wife and the kids' mom, is a horse surgeon, which is hysterical, right? Because she's this brilliant woman. And there's even been a couple of jokes, like, Beth, I always knew you could have been a human surgeon, but she's a horse surgeon, and she's definitely smarter probably than everybody else on the show, but Rick. Um, and she's definitely the person who keeps it together, but she definitely has the wants to please daddy
Hmm.
aspect of her. She loves her father, but yet she hates him because of the stuff that he did with the abandonment issues and all that really play into it. But she certainly seems to put her kids first. Like, you don't see a lot of Beth's friends hanging around and everything. It's definitely her job in dealing with Rick and his shenanigans and looking out for Morty and Summer. And then, of course, who and Purple, you tell me if you agree with this or not. I think, weirdly enough, the most identifiable person on the show is Summer Smith, which is Rick's granddaughter and Morty's sister, and she's just kind of like, I think she acts how a lot of us would, which is you want to be involved, but then there's times where you're glad you're not involved, but boy, you don't like be left out, but man, oh man, she is just somebody who throws in, and she could be really compassionate, but she can be a bull when she has to be. And I think she's like really the most underappreciated person on the show.
I've got to admit, I kind of see what you mean. I like that character, and she's definitely, whenever she's in these kind of weird scrapes, she's definitely a lot more adaptable to the situation than Morty is.
Right.
We've seen it kind of time and time again with, and even in this episode that we're going to kind of go into, she's got this very small bit part, but it's kind of a pivotal role she plays, which is really funny because you don't really see what she's doing.
Right. Absolutely. She's my brother said this to us one time. We're huge DS9 fans, right? Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And he said, wow, she's the Rom of the show, right? Rom always gets beat up and kind of made fun of. But if you watch episodes at Rom's end, he's like the save the day guy more often than not. And of course, at the end of the series, he becomes the Grand Nagus. And I just laughed at that. I'm like, wow, I don't think anybody else would see that unless you were this huge Deep Space Nine fan and this huge Rick and Morty fan. It's a great call. But yeah, that's pretty much the background of it. And like we said, very sci-fi based, a little bit of fantasy, right? Um,
Very
but
self-aware humor as well, you know.
yeah, yeah, sitcom-y in a lot of ways, but also could be very deep and introspective. There's an episode, and we're not going to go into every episode of it because that would take us forever. We'd have to do a podcast of it to get over everything. But one that I think a lot of people either don't like or kind of pass over, the old man in the seat. I don't know if you remember that episode where Rick makes his own toilet. It's probably more famous for being the episode with is it Flutie or Blutie, where he wants to develop an app, and that's kind of the B story of Rick and making his toilet while Morty and Jerry try to erase the app that they made. But that whole episode revolves around Rick's loneliness and this need to kind of be the person who's in control of everything, and he realizes he can, and that he's pushed everybody away because of it. And it's a recurring theme of the show. You definitely saw that at the end of the last season. Um,
Yes. Would
when
you say that, and this show gets kind of looked at unfairly because of the kind of simplistic animation, even though, the character designs are, very kind of out there, but the backgrounds, the color schemes that they use are very rich. But because of the way they look, it looks simple. Do you think people kind of look down on it and kind of think of it as more of a kid show, even though it's definitely not for kids?
I think that's 100% spot on. And of course, that plays into a couple of things, and that's what they said. The first being, and I think a lot of people probably don't realize this, but Justin Roiland, like I said, he started out as an art student, and he developed some of these shows and everything and all and these concepts while he was in art school. So think of this: when you're in art school, right? You're pretty much writing, developing, and drawing your own things. So a lot of these drawings are based on what Justin Roiland originally drew. If you look at the eyes of the characters in Rick and Morty, they're these white circles, right, with these black scribbles. They're not perfectly symmetrical pupils. And like Justin Roiland has said in interviews, he did that because not only did it give the characters a little bit more panache and look different and everything was a unique look, but hey man, I'm Russian, dude. I'm trying to make 50 cells in a day. I don't have time to sit there and draw a perfectly round circle and color it in and everything. So it's based on his drawings. And secondly, and this is really important, is um, if you don't want a lot of computer generated stuff and you don't want to have to send stuff to South Korea for a year and a half to get drawn, where you can't be as timely as you want, the more simplistic art you have, the better it is. So
Hmm.
yes, you have those big colorful backgrounds, as layouts, almost like a matte kind of thing with animation. I would assume a lot of overlays in some cases and everything. Um, but I think that kind of plays into it. But it's also, and I'm sure this is kind of one of the points you're getting at too. It's very disarming, isn't it? Because, like you said, it makes people go, "Oh, this is looks like a kid show," but it's very disarming in the fact that it's kind of welcoming and it's warm, but it's this really deep and in many cases dark show um, that
Oh,
really
there
taps
is
in.
dark humor, absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
absolutely, death and is not a concept that they're afraid to shy away from, and you know, being being selfish and putting yourself not just first, but willing to knock other people down to be first and everything is just really weird. And that's a thing with you see a lot with Rick is as awful as he can be. And if you watch the opening, right, the opening credits, it's Rick jumping through the portal and he leaves Morty to be eaten by these two giant toads with teeth. Um, and it's, and there's a
A
whole other,
recurring theme,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I do want to call back because I said, man, if I bring up any episode, I've got to bring up this episode. And other than the pilot to show people, I would definitely have to show people the episode. And boy, you know what? As I'm talking to you, I forgot the name of the darn episode, but I'm almost positive it was a season 3 episode. Um, where no, it was season 2. It was where Rick and Morty are well, Rick walks in and Morty and the family are sitting at the breakfast table and they're eating breakfast with their uncle, and it's Jerry's brother, and then you find out that Jerry doesn't have a brother because they've all yeah right they've been invaded by 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 an alien virus or whatever it was and everything. And in the whole episode it's them trying to figure out like was it Total Recall? It might, yeah, it was Total Recall, which is a play on Total Recall, right? And they started anytime they would imagine a person, that person would appear, but they don't realize that this is an imaginary person, and what it is basically this alien virus usurping their ideas and making themselves kind of be not have a past with this person. And they're able to figure that out where Rick's like fighting everybody and he's locked them in the house, and all these different great characters keep appearing like Hammerai and Pencilvester, and Summer's imaginary friend from when she was a child is real, and they find out about it. And only through Morty, Rick tells Morty, like, I have about three good memories of you. The rest is, just you messing up and all this. And Morty gets really mad and he's about to shoot Rick as these two imaginary people are holding him. And he figures out, wait, the only way that we could tell if somebody's real or not is if we have bad memories of them. Because if you have only good memories of the person, that's the alien force trying to trick you into believing who they are. So then the rest of the episode is them running around going, of course I remember mom because she did this, and which was a great Beth Smith scene where she's drunk and Summer wants her to drive her to go get her pictures for school, and she's drunk and drops the wine bottle and gives Summer a black eye. And the rest of the episode is them figuring out who's real and who's not. And of course, the another great callback to that episode is the introduction of, and gosh, I can't believe I'm even saying this live on stream in front of a lady, but Mr. Poopy Butthole. And
Oh,
as,
God,
as
that
stupid as
character. Oh my
as
God.
stupid as that name is, he is a guy that has appeared in some form or fashion in every season. So I assume we're going to see him in season 5. But he's a friend of Rick's, I
And
guess,
favorite character,
and
absolutely.
definitely, yeah, definitely. That's why I think he's been brought back so much, because if you remember at the end of season, I think it was maybe 2 and 3 or something like that, or it was basically him saying, oh, "Okay, we'll see you next season," and he was at the end caps of. And I guess that's another thing we should turn on too, is make sure you always watch a Rick and Morty episode through the credits, because there's always an end cap. And sometimes it's just silly nonsense. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the show. Generally, it plays on a little joke in the show that they make a huge thing out of at the end. But it's just an interesting little nod, and it's definitely something that they did as a kind of an aside, but also to get you to watch the closing credits and watch through, and hopefully watch the commercial afterwards. But
Yes. So we were talking about the episode, and we were kind of coming up with, obviously there's themes that they've picked up on this time round. So to kind of jump into the beginning of season 5, um, it's clear that they're taking a little bit of a dig at the MCU, because it seems to be multiverse is going to be a recurring theme throughout this season.
it's certainly seen, they've played with it before, so that it's, so if anybody were to ever accuse them of anything, they can always go, we've had this concept before. You guys aren't, but the fact of the matter is, yeah, they definitely have. And certainly one could argue that the antagonist, somewhat protagonist, antagonist again in this episode, is obviously based right on Prince Namor. He's a version of the Submariner. I think he's kind of a cross between Submariner and Dr. Frankenfurter, right, from because he's got that weird sexuality with him. But Submariner, I don't know how much you know about him in Marvel Comics, and we won't get too geeky into
Hmm.
comics right now. But he's very arrogant, and
Yes.
and rightfully so, hates the surface dwellers and stuff and everything like that. He's kind of mellowed out, but he definitely has weird powers and stuff, and that's definitely a call out to that. So yeah, I think there's definitely some poking of fun at Marvel in general. Without a doubt, that's a great call.
Yeah, so as we were saying, this episode starts off with something that was a throwback to a previous season where they're doing kind of this multiverse, and what we thought they were going to lead into, it was just a throwaway joke in this season, in this episode, which I thought was kind of funny. And then it kind of, we get into the main start of the episode, and Morty saves Rick. He gets them back to Earth and crash lands this spaceship in the ocean. And instead of being grateful, Rick has to go at him for
Why'd you touch
landing
the
in the
ocean?
ocean. Yeah.
By the way, Purple, I can't believe this. Guess who showed up to watch us in the episode, even though I'm here? Pudgy.
Oh, Pudgy. Hey. Hey, Pudgy. We'll try not to say any no words, I promise.
There really isn't. There really aren't that many no words to say. And boy, Rick and Morty sure do bleep them out. For a show that's on late at night on a paid channel, they cut out a lot of words, don't they? Like, I'm pretty sure I think I know what Rick said when he made his comment about the Nintendo 69, but I'm not 100% sure what he said. It could have been one of two things, right? But no. So overall, with the episode, did you think that it was more of an intro to the season or a playoff or maybe a little bit of both or
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think it's a good kind of way of getting people back into it. I think it's a good episode if you've never watched it before. You can kind of watch this episode and then go back if you liked what you saw. Um, there wasn't really anything um, that if you've never seen it before, you wouldn't understand what was going on. Basically,
right,
there was an A plus and a B plus, which they usually have, and
right.
I just thought it was really funny that they introduced this nemesis that Rick supposedly had that we've never heard of before.
Yeah, so he's the great nemesis who actually at one time was like a great friend of his too, probably like up there with Bird Person and Squanchy. And Bird Person is my icon for people who are not 100% in the know. And Squanchy's this weird cat character who I think lived through the end of season two, with that awful massacre that they had there. But this guy seems to be up there. Do you remember his name, by the way? He only said it about 85 times in the Mr.
Yes,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Nimbus.
Mr. Which I just thought was great. He's one of those characters. I'm so used to them not revisiting characters that I won't be surprised if they don't. But boy, I sure would like to see him show up a couple more times. He's voiced by Dan Harmon, so it wouldn't be that hard to get him back. And his arc throughout the whole episode was just great. And I thought the B story was great too. With, like I said, Morty which I guess is that the B episode, or is the B episode Morty keeps going through the portal to get wine? Yeah, I guess maybe there's an A, B, and C story in this one. Because that of course was great and a callback to many, many pop culture references of sci-fi, right? And even a little bit of Excalibur in there and medieval times, and definitely Game of Thrones, right? When they're standing on the wall waiting to see if the evil boy will return. It was very, the more we're talking about it, Purple, you're kind of making me laugh because it was a really multi-leveled, kind of deep episode when you think of it. There's going to be a lot of YouTube videos over the next week with people doing all the Easter eggs, and they're going to be awfully long episodes
And the
talking
one
about
thing
it.
I would say to people who haven't watched these episodes is even though they're only about 20, 22 minutes long, they
Right.
pack a lot into these episodes. They're very, very fast paced. And this one in particular, there wasn't
Yeah.
really much breathing room. It just jumps from scene to scene to scene, but it does it actually very well.
I don't know, I know that you're in England, so your time's a little bit different, but I obviously stayed up late last night like I normally do. And I was able to watch it 3 times, and I'm sure I probably still missed some stuff. And that's one of the great things about this series, right? Is I find it to be one of the most rewatchable shows on television, in the last 10 years, certainly.
I'd agree with that,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. And as you say, even though you don't have to watch all of the seasons in order, you can pick out certain episodes and still enjoy watching them.
Right.
But this one, I think, is a pretty good jumping in point as well. I actually really liked Morty's character in this episode. You can see, even though he's just trying to have a date with his girlfriend and just try to get a
Right.
connection with her, he's actually really good at taking care of himself when Rick's not around as well.
Absolutely. And of course, too, Purple, the best thing about that is not just this having this date, but with this girl he's been infatuated with since episode one, right? And how he thinks he's got no shot with. And he just I guess guys, if you don't want to hear spoilers, just turn us down and piddle
Yeah,
around in the background but don't
we'll
turn
be
Purple off.
light.
But
We'll be
yeah, but
light
when
on the
you
spoilers.
Right. But when you watch the episode, you'll see that, Morty's in a situation where he's like, oh, I got nothing to lose. So he just decides to use his last little bit of time. I'd probably call my mom and my family. But he's a 14-year-old boy. So he decides to call his infatuation and, just basically says, hey, I'm sorry it didn't work out between. I wish we could have been better friends and got to hang out more and everything. And she's just kind of like, yeah, me too. Why don't we watch a movie tonight? And that, of course, makes him kick into survival mode, and that's how they end up touching the ocean. which was another great running gag in the whole episode, which was, I can't believe you touched the ocean, Morty. You had to touch the ocean, didn't you? You know?
So they crash landed in the ocean in previous episodes. It's just funny because it makes
Yes.
no damn sense.
Yes. Well, Purple, there again, to kind of dive back deeper into this, if you remember, a great episode, really phenomenal. Um, where Rick and Morty at the beginning of the episode are kind of like, "Hey, you know what we're gonna do? Let's go ahead and have an adventure of our own. It's just gonna be us having fun and everything, and we're gonna just kick back and everything." And they say, "Let's go to Atlantis," right? And they put on their flippers and they dive through the portal. And as they do, the scene opens up, and it's a kind of weird citadel of Rick's. And I guess maybe I should explain that real quick. Rick's main antagonist throughout the series is, well, there's really kind of two, right? The intergalactic government, which he kind of toppled at some point, but the Council of Ricks, which looks like it's still out there in some form or fashion, and he basically has disagreements with them constantly. He's one of the kind of outskirt Ricks, but this Council of Ricks is basically made up of Ricks from every dimension imaginable, right? Every universe incorporated into every dimension. So, and Rick and Morty very much buy into the theory of kind of like gosh, I hope I get that right. I'm going to sound really dumb if I don't, but kind of the stream concept of how time works with strings and everything, which is, um, if I decided today I'm not going to do Purple Show, I'm just going to go sleep in. Well, I've made a decision. So that breaks into two possible realities of the future, right? There's one where I go, no, get up and do your duty and go on the show, and another one where I blow it off. And what are the repercussions of that? So every time any one person makes any decision, there's a split in time, and those splits in times have different repercussions, but we exist in all of them. So there are infinite Ricks, and he says that in many episodes. There are infinite Ricks and infinite Mortys and infinite Summers, and there's certainly dimensions where there is no Morty because Rick never had Beth and Beth never had Morty. So they could kind of play on that, and then there's this whole Council of Ricks, like I said, which is a play on Council of Reeds. And if you're a Fantastic Four fan, you'll know what I'm talking about from that, which is all these Reed Richards from other dimensions get together and decide to, I think it's a concept that came out about 10 or 15 years ago. And that's kind of what the Council of Ricks is. But the Council of Ricks hates our Rick. And I'm
He's kind of
assuming
like
that,
a spanner in the works, isn't he? That's why, he
yeah,
won't
well, a hundred
align.
percent. A hundred
Yeah.
percent right. They kind of even knew he probably wasn't the one killing all the other Ricks in that one episode, and they decided to kind of pin it on him. And of course, he ends up saving the day. But his biggest line in that is that, well, I guess I'm the most Rick of all the Ricks. And Morty kind of is like, yeah, I guess so. And he goes, well, that makes you the most Morty of all the Mortys. But it's this play, and I don't think they could have done the show any other way, right? You would, if you're going to introduce that concept, your Rick has to be a variant. He's got to be kind of outside of that because and that's the kind of odd thing. He goes against the nature of what a Rick should be, right? You have millions and millions of dimensions where this Rick that looks like our Rick and all exist, and yet he fights that. And we don't know where it comes from. There's, of course, that great episode, which I've mentioned a couple times now, the Rick Shank Redemption, where Rick escapes from intergalactic prison and frees himself and goes back and joins his family. But his whole thing is that he's fighting all these guys because he doesn't believe that that's how they should go. He thinks they're fascist, right? And he even does the thing when he escapes from jail where he does this whole fake, or maybe it's not fake. We don't really know. There's got to be some truth in it, right? Background where he's offered a chance. Hey, come join the Citadel of Ricks. Come be with us. Here's a portal gun. You could do this and everything and all, and you could join us. And look, man, we rock. We rule the universe and everything. And he's like, no, I'm happy. I'm happy with my wife and kid. I'm happy being a simple scientist, inventing stuff and everything. And they kill off Beth's mom, and it looks like they killed off Beth too. So we know it's not a completely true background story. But there's got to be something to it, because then Rick invents his own portal gun, and he's a self-made man. He wasn't given this portal gun, so to him, that's a whole different level. And if there is a background story about that, where the Citadel Ricks did something to push Rick into becoming a real Rick, right? What they would call a real Rick, somebody who uses a portal gun, time travels, and does stuff to bring up Ricks, then yeah, we can understand why he would dislike them. He probably hates them, if the truth be told. And it's an interesting concept, because it plays out a lot of these things, and it makes Rick the kind of person he is, which is untrusting, but kind of a guy who's just like a lot of other people. He wants to be loved by the people he wants to be loved by, and he wants to be left alone by the people he doesn't really care about. But let me ask you this, because gosh, I know I'm doing all the talking. I feel like a jerk, but I want to know: do you view Rick as a hero, an anti-hero, or
I, to be honest, I wouldn't really class him as a hero. Definitely not.
right?
Vaguely, I suppose you could say he's an anti-hero. He is chaotic good. I would say he will do the wrong thing for the right reason repeatedly.
Absolutely. But that's funny, because when you think about it, he does, and you're 100% right. He's not the classic hero, but he did sacrifice himself, right, for Morty. Remember when they were in season 2, they were falling through space and everything, and he gave Morty his collar, and he's like, "I'm okay with this. This is good, Morty. Be better than me." And he certainly, in this episode, um, where Morty decides he's going to go after Jessica, right? Jessica's taken, and he decides he's going to go in and try to help Morty, and basically risk his life, right? He kind of knows, like, oh man, these guys they're better than us. They've outpowered us, and he's ready to go. Um, so there's times where he really lays it on the line for them, and that's definitely a heroic thing to do, right? I mean, I can't think of a more heroic thing to do than lay your life down for somebody. But yet, in the next episode, he'll be kicking Morty in the backside, and leaving him someplace. And
Well, even this episode, he spent most of it kind of berating him because he wasn't doing what he wanted him to do. He kept telling him, "Go get the wine, go get the wine,"
yeah,
and all Morty wanted to do was spend some time with his girlfriend.
yes,
But
and
I
it
would say
and
this is
and
more
it,
of
and
a
it
Morty episode anyway. You know,
absolutely,
Rick was kind
absolutely,
of the side character in this
yes.
particular one.
And and in a way, Rick, if you look at that episode too, Rick's like, "Look, dude, I'm doing all the power. You messed up. I'm doing all the work. All you have to do is be the wine boy." And even obviously, a guy named Kyle could do that, which is another great callback. I don't know if you caught that or not, but when Mr. Nimbus says, "Ah, where's the other boy? I liked him better. What was his name? Kyle."
Oh, yeah.
And Rick's like, uh, Well, Purple, we're about 40 minutes in. I don't want to neglect what you wanted to do here, which was really get into this episode and talk about season 5. So, kind of steer me in the right direction. Do you have any questions, anything you want me to hit on? Does anybody in chat have a question that they want answered that maybe between the two of us we can answer?
Yes, so
Well,
we were saying that obviously it's a good kind of opening. We've
yes.
got the B and the A and B stories running at the same time. We had this kind of story with Mr. Nimbus, so he's this Namor type pansexual character that's coming on to basically everybody. A character that apparently has this huge backstory with Rick that we've never heard of and quite possibly will never hear of again, which
Yes.
is in itself is funny. And then we had this kind of Narnia-esque story with Morty, where he keeps going back and forth into this other dimension to get a bottle of wine.
Well, that very true. He's not. It's not really Narnia though, because Rick doesn't isn't a beaver who believes in Jesus Christ, which is funny yet somewhat offensive, but still more funny than anything. Because what a great reference. And there again, that's the beauty of the show, right? We have these references and callbacks and whole episodes that wrap around not just science fiction, but science fact in some case, and fantasy, and definitely history, right? There's a Riddle Snake Galactic, Rick Lactica, which is where the episode where Morty gets bit by a space snake, and there's space jazz and everything. That was a whole play on, not just the Terminator, but going back and looking at 20th century history and how it kind of builds up and how the snakes develop in the society because of what Morty did, which was replace a snake with a different snake and send it back to the snake planet after they almost killed him. So it's that kind of play that they do, and boy, this episode hit every target.
It really did. I was surprised that I was a little bit skeptical. You know, I watched the previous season. I wasn't that impressed. I mean, there were some good episodes, but most of them were a bit eh. So I was a little bit skeptical coming into season 5. I was thinking, well, you know, are they going to recapture the magic that they had before, or is this season, you know, has the show itself kind of run its course as a lot of shows often do? But they seem to
Mhm.
have kind of found their footing again, which is kind of nice. You know, the voice actors again are on top form, and they seem to be having fun with the characters. Um,
Oh, 100%. And I think this episode is a good precursor to that. You know, Purple, one of the things I did that I was unsuccessful at, but I'm not upset with myself because this is kind of how they run their show. I tried to find out a lot about the upcoming episodes this season. And, you know, with many shows, there are at least the first two, three, sometimes episodes of a season to critics to let them watch and they could get an idea of it and everything and do reviews and talk. Rick and Morty do not do that. They're very close. As a matter of fact, if you go right now, you try to read the description, at least right before the show when I did, again, that you know, you try to read like on the next episode, it pretty much gives you the title and it'll be like Morty gets in trouble with Rick, you know, it's like this kind of thing. So it's very hard to find out what's going on in the season ahead. Like I said, we know because they played it up so much in the season 5. Um, um, oh, what do you call it? The season 5 promos, the Voltron episode, and it certainly looks like from the end of the episode, this episode, that they're going to do a callback to the end of last season, right, where they kind of bring up, hey, you know, when Space Beth came back, I decided to put multiple versions of ourselves out there as a safety precaution, and it looks like somebody's caught on with that and everything. So my guess would be that there's going to be in season 5 a lot of pop culture references that they're going to kind of rely on, almost some standalone kind of episodes. And I
yes.
think there probably will be a recurrent theme because one of the things that was very noticeable in this episode, there again, not very unlike Rick and Morty. We've only had one season opener that really called back to the season finale of the season before it, and that was season 3. Is you just kind of almost start again. You know, it's sometimes Rick's in the doghouse and they come back and he's out the doghouse. Sometimes Rick's on top of things and they come back and it's a normal day. And that certainly seems to be the case with this. They didn't call back to Space Beth. Uh, I assume Phoenix Person's still locked in a closet in the garage where Rick's eventually going to get to him and try to fix him and bring him back to some kind of old version of himself and everything. So I suspect that they're going to play with that a little bit more. But with the Rick and Morty guys, as some of you who put 4s and 5s in the chat know, it could be a long time coming, right? We saw Tammy an episode, a season later, and then she was kind of the main antagonist at the end of last season. So that's a payoff from all the way from season 2. So it could take a while to get these people back, but I think you're going to see a lot of callbacks, and you're going to see a lot of pop culture references. A lot, certainly, the people who write this are in love with things from the '80s and '90s and those concepts. If you remember right, there was even a Voltron callback in another episode where Rick and Morty became toxic Rick and Morty, and Rick used the drones to find Morty. And I think he maybe was in another dimension or not. Do you recall that? And Rick and Morty's apologize. He ends up living with like a grown woman, and they're in a relationship. And you know, she even says, "Well, I can't believe you're leaving, Morty." And he's like, "Look, you can keep the apartment, and you can have the drones." And Rick goes, "No, you can't have the drones. The drones are cool. They form a little mini Voltron, and and they all join up together." So there's someone there obviously really loves that Voltron, and I seen somebody yeah, it was Jay Nash said at least once, maybe even twice, said, yeah, bird person is Hawk from Buckrock. Yeah, there's a
Agree
good
with
call,
that.
Jay Nash. That's 100% correct because he looks like him too, even with the weird nose and the hair and everything. And I don't know if you remember Buck Rogers, Purple, but Hawk was a creepy looking guy on that show back in the 70s. I've only seen it in reruns. I don't even know if I was born yet, but if I was a little bitty guy when that show first ran. But
Arwen's
yeah,
got a good question. She says, "What's the sassy level of the show?" I adore Archer, but it's hard to watch my kids around though. They're nearly grown. I would say older kids fine,
yeah,
but little kids it's definitely too adult. One, it's
uh,
violence. Two, at least this
yeah,
episode, there was quite a lot of sexual innuendo,
yeah.
and usually there's quite a lot of kind of gore as well. Not so
Well,
much swearing because they tend to bleep it out.
they 100% bleep it out. Or when I think if your kids are middle school or older and they're somewhat mature, they would be fine watching that. I don't think you'd have. They might not get some of it, and that could be the fun of it. But I think overall, it's pretty benign when it comes to that stuff. You are right though. When they have violence, I mean, they're not above like ripping people's guts out and stuff and showing it. You kind of almost don't realize it because there again you said like when you go back and you watch Rick fighting Phoenix Person and his innards get ripped out, there are these colorful innards, right? They're pink and bright blue and stuff like, and they don't look like a normal person's guts that you would imagine. But when they show it, they do show it. So I guess if you had a little kid, it would be real disturbing. But I got news for you. If you have a 12 and 13-year-old, they're going to find a way to watch this. And if they're interested in it, they're going to watch it because their friends are, without a doubt, you know, and certainly high school and college kids. That was the target demographic for this when it came out. And I think Adult Swim was even surprised that it hit so high on all these demos. And it really is, if you go back and you look, wow, it's one of the top rated shows of the week, and it's, you know, it certainly beats anything on CW. That, well, I don't know if that's worth bragging about, but I guarantee you, even with it falling, they only had one episode not hit over a million, and that was the intro to season 3. Because, like I told you, they showed it originally in the States on April Fool's Day, so people weren't expecting it, you know. So a lot of people didn't watch it. But boy, what a smart move on their part to do. And you know, you think back at season 3, it was still a new show. It was hot, but people still weren't 100% aware of what it was and what it was about. And I thought that was a genius marketing thing for them to do. You know.
I'd absolutely agree. Yeah, and bearing in mind what time it's on at night as well, so it's definitely more for the adults overall.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It is, and they even say that they call it an adult sitcom with sci-fi and adult dark humor is how it's described in many ways, and I think that's spot on.
Would you say that this season you're kind of looking forward to it now that we've got the first episode? Because obviously it hasn't dropped all at once, which is kind of refreshing. They're
Yes.
releasing it a week at a time, which is nice. Because some people like to binge watch, some people like to do have the break in between.
Right. So the question is am I happy with that's the route they're going? Yes, I think that's the way to go. There was a talk at one time, somebody, I think even an executive at Adult Swim, who my guess would be they're not there anymore because there was a real turnover in Adult Swim over the last few months, had even come up with the concept of like, look, we a few years ago we said let's do 70 episodes. We're 10 episodes into that. Why don't we, since you guys seem to be able to get these produced in a rather timely manner when you're rolling, why don't you guys just kind of keep rolling, and we'll release an episode every month, and you know, we'll take a break around Christmas time so the staff can have a couple months off. And that's not a bad idea, right? Like the first Sunday of the month, there's a new Rick and Morty, but that's just kind of not how adults. Somebody pointed out that's not how Adult Swim rolls. You know, you can pretty much turn on Adult Swim at any time, and the majority of what you're getting are reruns of shows. Now they might
Hmm.
be reruns of great shows, right? Like they show American Dad, and they had this interesting thing that they do where they show like the previously new episode on TBS and the previously new episode on Fox of both American Dad and Family Guy, respectively. And even if you don't like those shows, it's an interesting concept. But it's not that rare for you to turn on Adult Swim and see a show like 12 Ounce Mouse, which was one of their very first shows, which is more than 12 years old, not only being shown again, but they revisited and had a season three after not being on the air for 10 years. So for them to have Rick and Morty spread out like that, I don't think would work as well. And I certainly don't think the concept, and I think you and people like Loki and Clobber and Times have all talked about that. The whole concept of dropping everything at once just doesn't give. Certainly, Gary, right on Neurotica, said it doesn't give a show the feed it needs. And this is
Doesn't give it the
definitely
life. It's kind of it's a one and done. People will binge watch it, but they won't talk about it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And look, you don't need that with this show because people are going to watch. People who like this show, and certainly people who love this show, they're going to watch it when it premieres, and then they're going to binge watch it after it's done. They're going to go to Hulu or the Adult Swim app and put their cable thing in, and they're going to rewatch these episodes, so they don't need that. And this definitely leaves you wanting more, and I'm okay with that concept. As a lot of you know, and a quick update on my brother, his first little round of cancer treatment went well. They still think they're 99.9% sure he's clear on that. But for
That's
years and
excellent.
years and years, I've helped raise my nephews. They don't really have a mom, and for the last 10 years, I've been with them. And it's definitely for us, no matter what's going on. Hey, Sunday night at 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, because we're in New Orleans, we get together and we watch Rick and Morty. And when the boys were younger and they were still like in high school, and well, two of them are, but it's like, okay, go to bed now because it's 10:30. You have school in the morning, unless it's summertime. But it's a show that we would all watch together, and I think that that's pretty rare nowadays. And you just don't get that with Netflix, right? When you have 10 seasons of it, we all watch that on a Sunday after football. That's how you watch that. But Rick and Morty is maybe the last must see TV, right? You got to watch it live. You got to watch it. And you got to watch it on a channel, you
Hmm.
know? So,
I'd agree with that. And Mark brings up some really good ones as well. He says, all the William Street shows are funny. Remember, Adult Swim was nothing but Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Braxy Lab 2021, and Harvey Birdman. I miss those days. Those are some great shows. And this one, I think, is kind of no exception.
right.
I was actually surprised how much I did actually enjoy this episode. I was thinking, well, previous seasons were a little bit hit and miss. Like, is it something that we're going to really enjoy? But I'm actually looking forward to the next episode now.
I am too. I am too. And I tried my best to be one of those guys who breaks down and then for those of you who know this, I apologize, but for those of you who don't, the opening credits change every year. They're bookended by the same thing, but they'll intertwine them with a snippet, like just a second or two of an episode coming up that season, and then a whole fake, right, a MacGuffin, like things that don't happen. And it's weird because there's a scene where Rick looks like he's trying to revive Noob Noob. Noob Noob was from the Vindicators episode. And Purple, you and I could do a whole show on Vindicators. That is just talk about making fun of Marvel and DC. Yikes! Um, but
Yet
I'm
they
sitting here.
weren't subtle.
I'm sitting here thinking there's probably not going to be a Noob Noob scene like that because the scene right before it is the Voltron scene, and we know we're having a Voltron episode. So it's fun to see and watch it and everything. But yeah, I think season 5 could opening couldn't have been better for your show because man oh man, it just hits every little thing you want it to hit, right? It hits the family continuity, it hits, Rick and Morty kind of at their best and at their worst. And I'm gonna spoil this line. I don't care if anybody likes it or not. I think the best line of the show is, and you could throw out yours if you think I'm wrong, which is Rick Sanchez. You didn't think I'd let you die alone, did you? um, where Mr. Nimbus comes in and basically saves them at the end. I thought was just if we would have been in a movie theater, Purple, we'd have stood up and cheered at that scene, right? That was just phenomenal.
Actually, love the the back and forth with Mr. Nimbus and Rick, and I fingers crossed we actually see him again, because they have this nasty habit of bringing on this character,
Yeah.
and you don't ever see them again. You think, well, you know, what the hell happened?
Yeah, or they're put on a shelf for an entire season. Maybe you see them at the end and everything, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm ready to see Mr. Nimbus eating beignets again, and I thought that whole concept was just hysterical. They're having this huge meeting, and Nimbus brings his world map, and there's this table with beignets, ham, bottles of wine, and mashed potatoes on it. That Rick has set for their summit to kind of end the thing, and that whole play is just a great concept of just kind of who Rick is, right? He's got this guy who at one time was maybe his best friend, maybe almost as good of a friend as Bird Person was, and then it became his nemesis, and they both became kind of bored with each other because they kind of relied on each other and had this real negative kind of thing, but yet there's obviously still some real love there, which was of course shown at the end of the show because you could only get that mad at somebody who you actually have feelings for and consider a friend or someone that you care for because they did that. And then, of course, as we know, there's generally no repercussions in the show. So even though Rick went to jail, beaten up in tatters at the end, he'll be back at the kitchen breakfast table with Beth making him pancakes come next Sunday.
Although there is continuity within the show, they're very, very lax with it. So
Yeah, it's. I think it whatever benefits the writing and to either and that's another thing that the show does well. I hope you agree. It's just that they accommodate the fans most of the time, but they're certainly not above to sticking it to the fans and going, you know what, the hell with you guys, we're going to do this, and if you don't like it, too bad, or or
but
you don't know,
you're
you don't
just
know
in it
what
for
you
the
want.
ride,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
Right, but it's very fair. Like it's not a if you don't like my politics, don't buy my comic, because they certainly give us what we want. They're not dumb on that part, but they're not afraid to take it to new places and everything. And I think that says a lot about the show.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. Pat, thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining me today.
Thanks everybody. Guys, I want to end with this. And well, first, thank you, Purple. But I didn't get to read all the chat, so I'm going to go back and watch the show. But I'm always kind of like, whenever there's a guest on, I'm like, why isn't the guest reading the chat? Man, it's hard to read the chat, Purple. You're like so focused on talking and looking at stuff. And I'm sure I missed all the cool stuff all my friends said in chat. But thank you for having me on. And if anything comes up again that you want to go with this, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. What I will probably do, since we're having fun with it, I don't think I'll do a live stream, but if Paris, if you're willing, I'd love to do like a maybe 15-minute review of each of the episodes and pre-record them and
Sure,
release them that
absolutely.
way.
We can 100% do that, and I like pre-record too because whatever I mess up, you can just edit out.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank
So,
you all.
Pat, where can we find you? I know obviously we're on
Yes,
Twitter at the
that's
moment.
great. Real quick, Purple actually helped me pick my name because my whole goal was to introduce my channel, which didn't happen because of the weather and the power outage this week. But the best thing to do is, and I will keep you up to date on everything, is to go to Twitter, and I'm under Lightning Shrimp. I originally was going to be Shrimp Lightning, but somebody pointed out to me, "Oh wow, cool, like lethal lightning," and so I was like, "Great, I'm glad we swapped it around." So yes, I am from here on out, and I'm actually very happy with this. Lightning Shrimp at Twitter. So look me up and follow me, and I'll let you know how things go as the channel develops over the summer. I want to have some videos up and everything. So that's my goal to have done before August 1.
Be brilliant. Yeah, as soon as you're up and running, let us know and we'll get you back on and we can do another show together. That would be fantastic.
100%. Thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome, guys. Thank you ever so much. If you're not following Lightning Shrimp, please do, because as he said, he's got a channel coming, which I'm very much looking forward to. I will be back later on this evening. I'm going to be joining Clobbering Times, so that should be fun.
Yes.
Can't wait for that. And then I will be back Wednesday. So a massive thank you to you guys today. Huge thank you to Palace for joining me. You're a fantastic guest. It was great to get to talk to somebody who knows the kind of ins and outs of this show, because there's a lot of fans, but not a lot of people can go so in depth. So I really, really appreciate that. And
Sure.
guys, I hope you have a wonderful Monday, and we will see you around YouTube pretty soon. So take care, guys.